And g'day, friends and fans. Welcome. I'm the author, David Applegate, author of the book, The Boyhood of Cade, book one of The Empire of Elves, and welcome to Future Fantasy Empire. This channel is sponsored by people like you, the viewing audience. After the show, check out the links in the description. Twitter viewers, those will be in the follow-up tweets. Today with me is the poet, Vanita Shukla Hawk. Now, before we start, a little bit about Vanita. She started writing poems in 1981 at the young age of 13, following a deep personal trauma. She needed an outlet for her raw and powerful emotions to find relief, release, and ultimately redemption. The topics she wrote about were very personal, private, and at times dark: unrequited love, desire, pain, betrayal, and her budding sexuality. Many of her poems also had a spiritual undertone. The maturity and depth of her poems as a young girl belied her age. After a hiatus of almost 4 decades, she started writing again and launched her poetry blog in November 21. Memories from Another Lifetime is a series of her poems written as a young girl. Vanita's mission is to make the voice of her younger self heard, and she invites the reader to join her in this journey. The link will be in the description below. Vanita Hawk, Vanita Shukla Hawk, originally from India, lives in Denmark with her husband. They have one son. Vanita, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, David, and good morning from Copenhagen, Denmark. I hope your day has gone well so far. You're in Australia. So, yes, my name is Vanita Shukla Hork, and I started writing poems 4 decades ago. But I launched my poetry blog in November 2021, so that's quite recent. And since then, I've published 4 volumes of my poems in the series Memories from Another Lifetime. And I am really thrilled to be here today to talk to you and to your viewers. So thank you so much for inviting me.
You're quite welcome. Now, you started writing poetry in 81 as a teenager and then launched your blog in 21. Tell us a bit about that journey.
Yes, so as you as you said, I'm originally from India. My father was a career diplomat, and in 1981, I returned home to live with my parents and my family in Trinidad. I was 13 years old, and I had just spent a very harrowing year at a girls' boarding school in India. It was a very painful experience. It was bullying at a very young and vulnerable age for a girl. And the pain, it just sort of unleashed the poet in me. It wasn't when I started writing poetry, it wasn't, a premeditated act or a structured process. I just feel these flashes of inspiration, like, downloads coming to me. And I just knew I had to grab a piece of paper, anything, a pen or a pencil, and just start scribbling before it disappeared. And, this would happen. And I wrote copiously during the 80s while I was a teenager. And as you mentioned, the poems, they were very dark and deep and very mature, really, considering I was just a teenager and had like literally no life experience. But I wrote and I saved those papers, and I got married at the age of 21. I got my university degree. I'm not a poet, full time author, or a professional writer. I actually have a career in the corporate world, a full time career, and quite demanding at times. So I started with that. Our son was born. So, the humdrum of everyday life, and it just, getting on with things took over, and I didn't write. So I stopped writing poetry. And then during the Corona lockdowns, the first one in 2020, I was working from home and I suddenly realized I have a lot of time on my hands now. And I had actually started writing again a few years ago, and they were a little different from the ones I wrote 40 years ago. But I was kind of inspired by this recent spell of writing, if you like. And I realized, maybe the time has come to actually type those 40-year-old poems because, the papers were getting old and disintegrated. I might even lose them forever. So I got myself a personal laptop and I started typing the poems in in the summer of 2020, our annual holiday. And that's when I realized, these poems, they're actually quite good. This young girl had a lot to say, and she never got to say it. I mean, nobody ever really heard her. And I thought, I'm going to make it my mission to make her voice heard now because I can. As a 55-year-old, that's what I'm going to do. So I launched my poetry blog um, in 2021. And then after that, things kind of started rolling and I, published the 4 books. So that's really been my journey to make that girl heard finally.
Right. And you self-published your poems as written as a young girl, 4 books so far in a series, Memories of Another Lifetime. Now, tell us about them. Will there be more?
Yes. So if you look at the title of the series, why Memories from Another Lifetime? Well, when I was typing these poems in 2020, when I was starting to do that, I did wonder, how could I possibly have known about such emotions, hurt, betrayal, denial, infidelity, at that age? It certainly wasn't through personal experience. And as I said, there would be these flashes of inspiration coming through to me, driven by pain. And I just started asking myself, could these actually be memories from another life? Could that intense pain, the trauma, have actually blasted open a door or a window to previous lifetimes? And, like these were just coming through to me and writing them down in this lifetime. Was I really an old soul? Are these karmic memories? So that's where I got the title from. Okay, these are memories from another lifetime. And then when I decided, I had my blog and it was going well, and I wanted to publish books, I decided I would try to structure my poems by themes. Uh, and then, publish them theme wise myself. So the very first book was Pain, that came out in November 2022. So it's almost a year ago now. And I chose that title or that theme because, pain has been and still is the catalyst for my poetry. I never write when I'm happy and thrilled. I'm just too busy being happy and thrilled. So Pain was the first one out, and a bit of a tough one because the poems are very intense and not everybody, even though they can relate to it, want to actually be confronted with it. But that's just the way it is. Then book number 2 came out pretty fast. It was January of this year, called Love. So I chose the theme of love because as a person, that really defines me. Love has always played a role, an important role in my life, whether it be, unrequited love, deep love, spiritual love, filial love, whatever. But, that is who I am, I hope. Um, so love, especially after the hard-hitting theme of pain, I went over to love, to kind of give a balance, saying, all right, there's another side to me as well. Then the third volume, Desire, came out in March this year. I am by nature, as I'm sure you're already sensing, and perhaps your viewers as well, a very intense person. I have very deep and passionate emotions. And Desire really are poems. They were written as a teenager, as a young girl, but they do explore the themes of passion, desire, longing. And as you also mentioned in your intro, my poems were also about my budding sexuality, a girl going over to womanhood. And what does that look like and feel like? So Desire was a third volume. And then the latest volume, the fourth one, Soul, came out in August. So that's really quite recent. And all my poems have actually a spiritual undertone to them, regardless of whether it's pain, love, desire. And spirituality is really important to me. It's not about religion or faith, it's simply about belief in a higher power, something greater than ourselves, and the belief that we have a soul, we each one of us are on a soul journey. We have soul contracts. There's karma, there's destiny, there is fate. And yes, religion does also play a part. We pray to God when some of us do when we're down on our knees. So there's a element of that as well. So soul is actually a collection of poems that are more spiritual in their themes than the other poems. Will there be more books? Yes, I have a couple of themes lined up. So I'm hoping that over time I will get those other volumes out as well.
Now, you mentioned difficulties. How difficult was it to write your first book, Pain?
Oh, very difficult. You keep thinking about jumping or getting out of your comfort zone. Well, here I was literally parachuting, jumping, skydiving out of my comfort zone. I'd never done this before, and even though I said I'm going to do this, then the reality of it struck me or hit me. And well, the very first part was, I'm an indie author. I'm self-published. I publish my books myself on Amazon. But first, I had to get the hang of that. I mean, how do you actually go about publishing and putting your work out there? So the technicalities of publishing and also some of the legalities of it was quite daunting. But then the question was, all right, which poems to include in the volume? So I decided on the theme of pain because it's really been the catalyst of my poetry. But which ones to include? So I really read my poems very critically. And at one point, I wondered, are these really good enough to publish in a book? Would people really want to read them? So it was a big part of the process, just deciding, okay, which poem should go into this volume? Also, being the first volume, I wanted to make sure, it was a good, strong start. Um, but having chosen the poems, then the next challenge was, how do you order them? Because in poetry, you need some kind of flow, some kind of narrative between the poems. It's not, you're not all over the place. There has to be something. So actually getting the poems in order was another challenge. I kept rearranging them, and it was really low tech in that I printed all the poems and I spread them out on my dining table. And, like I
So
was
you were
playing cards, I was just, moving them around, and you're trying to read them again and say, nah, no, yeah, okay, numbering them and then scratching in them out and renumbering until I finally felt, right, this is it. We got the flow. Then the third challenge was, okay, which I've already talked about, what do I call my series? Because I knew by then I was going to do a series. So it had to be a title that could carry through all volumes. And as I said, I did think that these are probably memories from another lifetime. And it also says in the intro to each one of my books. Um, that's how I landed on that title, saying, all right, this is good for all my volumes. And then the final and actually in a way most important decision was, what about the cover? And the cover of the book is what people see before they even start reading it. And I wanted a cover that was unique and that would reflect the passion and the depth and the intensity and also the color of my poems. And I was wondering, well, where do I get that kind of a picture from? And then I was just walking around our apartment here in Copenhagen, and my eye fell on one of the paintings that are up in our study. And it's actually a painting by my mother. She's an artist, Kusum Shukla. She's also a poet herself. And it was hanging on the wall. And I looked at it and said, that's it. That's it. That's the cover. And was a painting. I looked at the back of it and it said, In Search of Soul, 1995. And I said, it fits, old soul in search of soul. So I talked to my mom about this. I said, would you mind if I use your painting as the cover? And initially she was a bit hesitant because she's an established artist. She doesn't take such requests lightly. How are we going to use her paintings, in which context, and so on. I said, it's just the one. It's going to be on the cover. It will go so well. And luckily she said yes, and it did. And finally, I got that first volume out.
great. because I know what a harrowing process it is, and particularly with Amazon, you know, they are very particular about the content they publish. It's not as advertised where you could just come in, you know, although the approvals process now is automated. You just submit the manuscript and wait, and if they approve, they approve. If they don't, they usually don't tell you why. Although sometimes they do send you an email saying, "Don't come back."
Thankfully, that hasn't happened
They
yet, and I'm
yes.
hoping it's not going to happen to me.
No, but I've heard from a lot of people who've had trouble with Amazon, and I say the same thing. It is simple. Don't publish anything that isn't as more controversial that hasn't already been published. Because those are the books that hit the boundary.
And that's when you're challenging the boundaries. That's when you could also get the pushback and saying, no, we're not going there this far and no
We're not allowing
further.
it. Yes. Yeah. And over the years, they've refined their terms of service to recently include a lot of stuff that they had on their site. So I say to anybody who wants to be self-published, just understand Amazon isn't the only one. For now, they're the biggest player on the block. They've gone down from 90% to 70% of the market. Barnes & Noble is the next largest player, and after that, I think it's Koto and Apple, and so down the list. But
I
most
would
of the
say,
time,
sorry.
most of the time, I think most people are only going to self-publish to Amazon anyway.
Well, from my personal perspective, I would say that well, obviously Amazon is the largest and the one that I knew of, and that has the broadest reach. Being as an
Yes.
unknown indie author, but I would also say it's really empowering that we can, as authors, self-publish today. We can actually get our work out there, make our voices heard. My late father, he wanted to actually publish my poetry back then in the 80s because he believed in it. Both my parents did. And he really tried, and he did actually, go to newspapers or magazines in India, but it was so difficult. You go hat in hand and say, could you please publish this? And it's a yay or a nay. And I was just so glad that I didn't have to do that. It's like, I want to do this, I'm going to do this, and I am doing this. It's like, it's empowering to be able to get your voice out there as and when you want, with entire creative expression. And as I understand, you have to do your marketing today anyway, even if you're traditionally published. So hey, I mean,
Yeah.
you're learning new
You,
skills as well.
you're going to have to
How do you
do it.
actually get it out
Yeah.
there?
Yeah. Even if the biggest company in the world right now came down from on high and said, out of the tens of thousands of books that we rejected, we're going to accept yours. By the way, here's your schedule for the next 12 months. Clear your schedule, and off you go. Market your book, and you'll see them on Twitter. You'll see them on Twitter, on TV shows, etc. I mean, it depends who you are, at what level you are, but and this has actually been going on since the 80s. You have Stephen King going on late night television. You used to have Isaac Asimov on Letterman. I didn't realize how many times he'd been out there, but he's a man who shouldn't need to market his books after 200 books. But
Okay, somehow, David, that makes me feel so much better.
yes, so I've been there asking people to publish my book, and despite the people who like the book, I don't know. It's hard to describe because they just don't tell you why they won't publish it, and that's and I think it's probably the same for your father when he came home. What do I tell her? They said no, but can't
But
tell
didn't
you
say
why.
why. And actually, there's this little painful anecdote that he did, as I said, he went to some of these very reputable, respected
Yeah.
magazines, weeklies, whatever, in India, and he went directly in person to the editor and the publisher, who used to actually, he was a writer himself, and um, he got a couple of points from my dad. It was not many, but and he rejected it. And then sometime later my father said he saw something in the magazine and his name, the editor's name, that kind of looked like my poetry. And but he couldn't really prove it. But yeah, that was really, and he told me about it, I think maybe years later, but it was like, wow. I mean, like, wow. um this was like a 14, 15-year-old girl writing, and you're a grown man and a known writer, and you're still doing that. I mean, I can accept you're not publishing them because that's the name of the game, right? Will it sell, won't it, whatever. But to actually do that, that I thought was not well, it was a bit underhand, really. um
Unfortunately, that is far too common, and sometimes plagiarism succeeds.
well,
Look,
what
if
do
it
you know?
if it wasn't for the Kurosawa family speaking up years later, we would never know that George Lucas used beat for beat The Hidden Fortress. So Hollywood and plagiarism, and unfortunately, is the biggest pile, but it is not the only pile of you know what out there. And I suppose at times, I know I've experienced this too. I've felt like giving up, and I suppose you have too. Um, I pushed myself through it. How did you deal with it? What stopped you from giving up?
Well, it well, as you know, it's really difficult being an indie author and getting your work out there, trying to do your marketing. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot out there, social media, whatever, and you're really competing with a lot of very talented people as well, and very driven and motivated. And as I said, this, I'm not a full-time writer. I actually have a day job. So everything I do with the blog, with the books, social media, it's happening, in the evenings after a long day at work, or during the weekends after a challenging week. um, it's tiring, and to not see the traction, some progress, can be demotivating. um, but then what keeps me going is, first, I keep reminding myself of my mission, and saying, just try to remember, why you're doing this. You're doing this to get that young girl's voice out, to make her voice heard. And as long as people are visiting your blog, reading your poems, buying and reading your books, and by the way, they're all free on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have that, you don't have to pay for that, especially. So as long as people are, and then, something like this interview, David, the fact that, reached out to me and, offered to do this, it felt very validating, to saying, it will happen. Your voice, her voice, will be heard. There are people out there supporting you. I've met wonderful people such as yourselves through Twitter, now X, who've become friends. We engage, we support each other. They're so encouraging. And, uh, actually, people who've read my books are people who've probably read about it on Twitter. So there is a community, there is a soul tribe out there, keeping me going. um, and I would really say also to your viewers, if you do visit my blog, please do leave a comment. Let me know you're there, you've seen it, and what you felt about it. It means a lot to get back as well. Say, all right, I am actually reaching and touching people. It's not just out there. So it's it's to remember why I'm doing this, and to keep getting these boosts of support, motivation, encouragement, and people actually reading the poems, the books. It's been lonely at times, but I do know I'm not alone, not entirely.
That's good. Who has been most supportive of you and your mission in this journey to publish your poems?
Yeah, that's a good one, and a bit difficult. So I'll mention three people. Well, there are many, but of course, my late father. He tried 40 years ago to get them out there. It didn't happen, but he never stopped believing in them. He really loved my poetry. So obviously, in a way, I'm doing it for him as well. Say, hey, look, Dad, it's out there. We did this. The blog's there, the books are there. Um, my mother, who's very talented poet, artist, I mean, of course, she's helped me with the poetry. She enjoys it and, the cover, but she's also been a role model for me throughout my life in courage, in grace, in strength. Challenges happen in life. How do you deal with it? How do you keep your back straight, your chin up, and say, right, we're moving forward, but with grace, with dignity? That's been very inspiring. And then my older sister, Vatsala, who's actually, she's also a business and a life coach, and she's been my coach um, the last couple of several years. And, she really helped me to get the courage, to start, being more assertive, get my voice out there, believe in this, and, really step into my power. Because, what happened after the boarding school experience was I just lost my self confidence. I didn't think I was good enough. And, I tried to make myself small in situations. And, she kind of helped me say, no, you're going to take the space you deserve. You're going to use that space and you're going to use your voice just because you're you. And, that encouragement to actually be where I am today, claiming my voice. And she also helped me, she's a self-published author as well. So she helped me with a lot of the technicalities with Amazon, helping me kind of overcoming, whatever fear I might have had around it and saying, we're doing this. And she really literally helped me also with the blog. She helped me design the blog. So, she's played a key role and continues to in helping me in this journey. And then, of course, people, friends like you, David, people on Twitter, my friends there who really give me encouragement and support. And of course my husband and my son who kind of they've supported it. They're saying, okay, she's doing her thing and it's important. And of course that means a lot to me to be able to actually express myself like this in this space.
That is awesome because a lot of people, despite the encouragement from their family, give up because they feel that it's their obligation, that they're not sincere. But trust me, it is important, all of you out there, that if there is an artistic person, that their emotions and artistic work is just as valid as sports, or and in fact, I would say more so. I think sports may contribute to our physical well-being, whereas watching sports contributes to our mental decline. Art contributes to our mental growth. So forget the TV, get some poetry in your life, get some books in your life. Now, you've mentioned that you've written poetry as a teenager. Have you written anything recently as an adult? And how does it differ from the poems you wrote back in the 80s?
Yeah. So yes, actually, I started writing a couple of years ago, and it was again pain. That was a catalyst. Surprise, surprise. So I started writing, but the process was similar in the sense, again, it's not a premeditated thing or structured process. The inspiration, the flashes would come, and I realized that and I there's a poem here, but as opposed to the 80s, now I have a smartphone. So I'd open it, start writing an email to myself, writing down the poems. So it would be digital to begin with, and then of course transfer them to a proper document afterwards. But really, the process, the inspiration is quite similar to what happened 40 years ago. Um, if I were to compare to the style of writing, having fair typed these poems from 40 years ago, and now I know what I've written recently. Um, a lot of the themes are similar, but the style is a bit different. If you like, the newer poems are a bit gentler, softer, more rounded. And I think that comes with age as well. We are hopefully more rounded the older we get, more mature, more in
Healed.
balance, healed. And so even though there is pain, those emotions are still coming. It's not that raw, hard hitting poems that you have from 40 years ago. It's
No.
it's a wiser soul, I hope, that's now
Yes.
noting them down. And if you say, well, what would the theme be? Is there a theme? I would say yes. And
Mhm.
if I had to give it a name, I'd call it Twin Flames. Now, there's a whole lot of stuff out there, especially on social media, about what twin flames are and aren't. And a lot of people think it's a romantic thing. It could be, but not necessarily. In my experience, twin flames, it's a spiritual journey. It's really about some lessons you're meant to learn in this lifetime. So it's more a journey of ascension and spirituality for me. So I think that would probably be, well, never say never, but I think that would probably be my final volume. I'll end with the latest poems. Also, it's a progression. It's a journey
Yes.
in my life, in this lifetime.
Yes. No offense to you, because I think you've probably heard it. Art is pain. Pain is art. It's also, however, art is healing, and healing is reflected in your art. You
Yes,
it's
and I find it's a very cathartic experience. Actually, David, the funny thing was that when I was typing these poems in 2020, 2021, because there are so many of them, it was really a cathartic experience for me. It was okay, the lockdowns, it was really quiet. The world was quiet, and it was a very difficult time for all of us. But honestly, even back then, I had a sense we're being given the gift of time in this modern day and age. This might be the last time we are given the gift of time. Take it and use it wisely. Um, it's it's what I did, and it was cathartic because I had to go back to those poems that were painful. But when I wrote them, my heart went out. I knew who this person was. I felt this is a friend. She knows me. Finally, there's someone who knows how I feel, who I am. I mean, that 15-year-old and this 55-year-old woman were connecting with each other, and she was healing me. It was cathartic writing it out and then stepping back, because at times it was so intense, even I couldn't handle it. It's like, oh my God, I need to breathe. It's too much. It's too painful. It's too direct. But, she helped me, and I hope I helped her. So we're both one person now, here together, moving forward together.
And we have a comment from John. Sorry, John. Skydiving out of my comfort zone. Excellent. Thanks, Vanita.
Oh,
David.
brilliant.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That is
Because
exactly how I
remember,
felt.
yes, there's a delay, so he may not. We don't know at what point he's watching, so he could be well back. But he'll get the message. Sorry, oh,
No
I
worries.
forgot to mute my phone. Is there any specific you would like to tell your viewers?
Well, yes, I would just like to tell our viewers today that, you know, I really hope that you will visit the blog, read my poems, the books, and please keep in mind the age when they were written, because I think perhaps if those same poems had been written by a 55-year-old, you might think differently about them than when you realize it's a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old person writing these poems. So that's really, I would say, what makes this different, what makes this unique. And a lot of people have a very hard time actually believing, how could you write this at 13, 14, 15, 16? Well, I did. And that's the beauty of it. And I really hope that you will join me. in this journey, in this mission.
It's very touching.
Thank you.
And your journey is inspiring. And I hope anybody else who is inspired will check out your website and check out your book links. But is there any last words you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Just to say thank you once again so much, David, for this opportunity, for this wonderful time we've spent together today. I'd also like to thank our friend Zimi for connecting us. Lovely person. Thank you, Zimi. If you're watching this, I'm indebted to you. And I'd like to thank your viewers for joining us and hopefully staying with us. And I invite you to join me on the journey. And I hope I will see you somewhere or the other. Thank you so much. Much
Thank you.
blessings and love to all of you.
And much blessings and love to you. Now, before we go, I'll just wrap things up and thank everybody for watching. And please, to support the channel, like, share, and of course, subscribe. That helps the algorithm to spread the word. Now, to support the channel, we have the links in the description below. We have Vanita's links to her website and her books, as well as my website, which is my link tree, which has my book links in it. I have a merch store with merch, and I have a Patreon where you get early access to my writing. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and bye now.
Goodbye.